the very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier podcast, where I will sit down and converse with the superstars, the overachievers, the masters of our craft. Each episode will be a deep dive into their personal philosophies, their habits, the tools they use, and the secrets to not only their success, but overcoming failure as well.
First, find somebody you can mimic, then find somebody you can stand, and then try to focus on one style until you master that style.
So if you say I can't do something, well, you're absolutely right. But if you say you're going to, you're absolutely right with that too.
People say that you shouldn't define yourself by your work. That is not true.
You know what Dave Farley does when he's, lucky enough to be at the World Equestrian Games? I'm watching other people work.
Yeah.
I don't think we do that enough.
This podcast is for all of you out there who share my passion for the job and the desire to always improve. These interviews will put you in touch with the inner workings of the role models we all want to emulate. So let's get to it.
There's only so many hours in a day, and it's a matter of what you do with them.
Hello everyone, I hope you are all healthy and doing well out there. These are definitely interesting and challenging times. Today I'm speaking with Lance Sloman of Alberta, Canada. Lance has been shoeing since 1976 and has been the long-standing show farrier at Spruce Meadows, a world-renowned show jumping venue in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I first met Lance and his son Connor at the Hoof-Care Summit in Cincinnati. We were sitting in on a roundtable discussion on footing. This discussion focused mainly on the unique challenges of shoeing for horses performing and training on the synthetic footing. I found that Lance and Connor had many similar approaches to their shoeing as I did, and we met up afterwards to talk some more. Lance and I readdressed that discussion and many other topics in our conversation for the podcast. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So I'm sitting here today with Lance Sloman. He graciously offered to come up 7 flights of not upstairs, in the elevator, to sit down and
7 flights on the elevator.
Yeah, and have a chat. Now, I just met Lance and his son here in Cincinnati, and I heard a little bit about them. I haven't run across you guys before, but I know you're based out of Spruce Meadows out in Alberta, Canada.
That's right, yep.
So it's been great meeting you, and then I finally convinced you to come upstairs and sit down for a chat for a while.
It was great meeting you.
So I guess what we can start with is, I don't know your history, so in the conversation leading up to this, you mentioned that you were an accountant. So you didn't start out as a horseshoer.
Oh, no.
Okay.
What started me on the path to being a farrier, blacksmith, horseshoer, was my sister got interested in horses when I was in my 20s, and she was in her teens, and then stimulated my girlfriend to get interested in them. And I had always been a horse kid when I was growing up. I grew up in ranching country, Pincher Creek, Alberta.
Okay.
Which is tucked into right up against the Rockies down in the southwestern corner of Alberta. And I wanted to be a cowboy from the time I can remember. I watched Roy Rogers and Gene Autry on TV, and everybody around that country were ranchers. So that's what I wanted to be.
Okay.
I never did become a cowboy.
No?
And we moved away from Pincher Creek when I was about 14. It just killed me. I thought, I'm never going to see a horse again. We moved to the West Kootenays in British Columbia, and I thought, well, there's no room for horses out here. There's no open country, grasslands. Little did I know that there was actually a huge horse population. They were just hiding in the trees. And there was terrific riding opportunities on the logging roads, the old mining roads, and the scenery is spectacular.
I bet.
I really enjoyed horses out there. When I finally got back into them when I was in my 20s, I'd had a hiatus, and I've always loved animals of any kind. But after my girlfriend got interested, I got keen. And every time the farrier came around, I bothered him so much because I was so interested in what he was doing. He finally in one of my last years of university, he said, just go take a course. Quit bothering me all the time and go take a course and learn how to do it. And then you can get it out of your system and you'll never want to do it again.
Yeah.
Little did he know that he'd just got me hooked on it.
He planted that seed. So you were going to university to be an accountant?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then how long did you do that for?
Just 2 years.
Okay.
By then I'd realized that
Not your
wasn't
lifestyle.
for me.
No. So then did you go to school?
I went back to university.
Okay.
Actually, about the time I went back to university, I was actually trying to get a summer job, and it wasn't panning out. I wasn't getting a job right away. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the course. And so I went down to Bud Beeston School in Oklahoma,
Okay.
Oklahoma Farriers College. Then when I went back to university and just after Christmas for the second semester, at that time I was taking a basically pre-med, a Bachelor of Science degree.
Okay.
So I did 3 years of that, and I kept applying to the University of Saskatoon. And after the third year, I believe, the third attempt at trying to get into there and not getting in, even though my grades were good. By that time, I'd been doing shoeing horses in the summers because there's a lot of demand for shoeing horses in the summer. After 3 years of doing that, I was building up a fairly decent clientele. I was getting tired of being a poor student. So I thought, I'll take a couple of years and see where this goes. And here I am, 40 years later, still trying to figure this business, how to figure out how to shoe a horse.
Right. Yep.
And the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought I'll just do it until I get good at it, and I'll probably go on to something else, because I'll have gotten to the point where I'm ready to do something else, but I've never gotten there.
Yeah, you can't get bored at it, can you?
I've never been satisfied that I know as much as I want to know, and I just keep wanting to know more. And at places like this, these seminars are just
Yeah, we're learning stuff all the time, and
food for a starving man. Yeah.
yeah. No, hence why we met here.
Yeah. As soon as I saw you across the room, I knew.
Okay.
I knew that you were into the knowledge and
Yeah.
you were bouncing ideas off everybody.
I'm addicted to it
Yeah.
for sure. So, how did you end up at Spruce Meadows?
Right place at the right time. When I got to Calgary, I had gone to university in Vancouver, but when I decided I didn't want to be an accountant, I went to Calgary because in Calgary, in Alberta, they take a larger percentage of students into the university at Saskatoon than they do from British Columbia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're trying to better your odds.
So I was a British Columbia resident, and my parents happened to be living in Alberta, so I thought, well, they offered to give me a place to live so I could go to university there, and my chances were improved by being in Alberta. Sort of like the lottery, you got more odds being in Alberta than in BC. If I'd gone to Saskatchewan, I would have had even better odds, but I thought it was easiest to be in Alberta and give it a try from there.
Right. Okay. And so, as you built your clientele, was there anybody else that you worked with, or you had just kind of learned on your own? And
Well, actually, the fellow that had told me to go to school and learn it, I worked with him for a little bit, for a short time.
okay.
But then he was in the West Kootenays in British Columbia, and I moved to Calgary, of course, so I was on my own again. And I hadn't learned enough at school to satisfy me that I was capable of being on my own. But as it turned out, I sort of just said, well, jump in with both feet and
Let's try this.
and we'll work on some horses and I'll learn as I go. And even though you go through school, even university, if you've gone through university, you get out and you realize that you really don't know enough, and you learn from experience. if you think you know enough after university, you're delusional. It doesn't matter what field you're in.
Right.
Either you're delusional or you have so much hubris that you're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things are probably not going to work out well for you.
So after a couple of years, I finally hooked up with some guys that were really keen on learning from anybody and everybody. We would get together, and there was one guy that he was a bit of a perfectionist. He was really keen on being better himself, and he actually had been doing the journeyman thing. He would go and work with other farriers in different parts of the country and go down to the States and work with farriers down there. Anybody that he'd heard of, he'd try and work with them. I'd seen his work and admired the job he did on horses above any of the work I'd seen around the Calgary area. And finally bumped into him and some of the guys that he knew well, and he arranged to have us come, and every Monday night we would get together at his place. We'd practice building shoes, and then we'd sit down and have coffee and chat until his wife got tired of us being around and kicked us out, and we'd go home and crash. And so that was really good. He happened also to be, he and his wife were the people that started the Stampede blacksmithing competition. His name was Don Wenham, and he was really motivated to learn more. And he thought it was just an idea that he had that the Stampede competition would bring people from all over the world, and we could see what they could do, and it'd be a learning thing for us. With the Stampede, it was just going to be a 5-year, let's see where it goes thing. And it turned into, 40 years?
So with the competition in Calgary, how did they end up getting people from all over the world to come to that?
Well, it was sort of like that Kevin Costner movie, build it and they'll come.
Right.
And that's basically what it was. I remember one of the Italian farriers, David Casavecchia, he was very insulted that we had the hubris to call it the World Championships. Who are we to put on this contest and call it the World Championships? But
the world
at
showed
first, it was just North Americans.
Okay.
And the Americans were pretty keen. We had a lot of Americans come up. Bruce Daniels was one of the early competitors. We were really lucky in the fact that Bob Marshall had come over to North America from England, and he was a keen competitor over there, very successful. He'd been mentored by a fellow by the name of Tom Allison, who was an incredible farrier and had competed himself as well. He and Dave Duckett were both mentored by Tom Allison. Bob's dad, Pops Marshall, he was a very good farrier, but he wasn't really into the competition at all. But
okay.
So Bob had a really good grounding with his father and then with Tom Allison. So we were really lucky to have him in Western Canada at that time. And he came to the first competitions, and we saw what he could do, and we were just
blown away
by how amazing this guy was. And so he won 5 world championships in a row, I believe. He might have had a break between. I don't think so, though. He won the first one. I'm pretty sure he won the first world championship. And I think 4 consecutive after that. He and Dave tied one year. He invited Dave over. He said, "You've got to come over." I think that's what sort of broke the dam, and all of a sudden, after Dave came over, it was just all the Brits wanted to be there, and the Brits, they're big into competing, and they did well, all of them, the Scots, the English, the Welsh, and just got bigger and bigger.
And grew.
Yeah. And they loved it. When the Stampede decided that they'd run their course with it and decided to change direction a bit, I think the guys really kind of missed it.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So at Spruce Meadows, we're going to start it again, and hopefully it'll be just as good or better.
Right.
We're hoping it'll be even better
Yeah.
because those of us that were in the blacksmith committee at the Stampede, naturally, made all kinds of mistakes. We learned from other people's mistakes. We learned a lot from our own mistakes. I don't think we got all our mistakes fixed before. And the people that we've got Craig Trinka on board.
Oh, great.
He's going to be the showman. He's going to be Barnum and Bailey.
Oh, okay.
So he's
I think you've chosen the right person for that.
I think so. He's keen. He's an energetic guy. Anytime he's ever done anything, it's been full speed ahead.
Yep.
And he has the enthusiasm. He loves it. Anytime he does anything, he does it 110% or more.
Yeah.
He gives it everything. So I think it'll be a lot of fun.
No kidding. And when is that going to be held?
That's early September. I'm not sure of the exact dates, but it's the same week as the Masters. So it's going to be going on during the Masters tournament, which is their premier tournament of the whole year.
Okay.
It's one of the top 3 tournaments in the world, if not the top tournament in the world, for show jumpers.
So if somebody loses a shoe, there'll be a few good people there.
There'll be probably 120 competitors that can do a world-class job on those horses.
No kidding. That should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it'll take the pressure off me as the show farrier at Spruce Meadows. I won't even have to do any work.
And so back to that, how long have you been at Spruce Meadows?
It's probably been 40 years now.
Holy jeez.
Yeah. To get back to your question about how did I get into Spruce Meadows, it was being in the right place at the right time. Don Wenham and we used to talk an awful lot about everything and anything. We're dime-store philosophers, the two of us. And so he realized that I was really keen and that I really enjoyed doing a good job. And he thought I'd be a good fit for doing some of the horses at Spruce Meadows. He was doing probably half the horses there. A fellow by the name of Carl Goldgrabe at the time was doing the show jumpers, the horses that were competing at high levels. And Don, he had an awful lot of clients, and he thought I would be a good fit to do the school horses at Spruce Meadows and take some of the load off him.
Okay.
And he would be doing the broodmares, the foals, the young horses. And Carl would do the show horses, and I could do the school horses and the client horses, the boarders
Right.
that were there. And from there, Marg Southern, the matriarch of Spruce Meadows, she and her husband Ron are the founders and owners of Spruce Meadows. She noticed that I had been doing well at the competitions, at the Stampede competitions. I'd placed, I'd podiumed a couple times in the early days there. So when Carl decided that he was ready to back off from working so hard, and he was living in Edmonton and driving to Calgary to shoe the show jumpers at Spruce Meadows, and he decided that maybe he'd just like to stay at home. So she offered me the job of doing the show jumpers and the school horses both.
Oh, cool.
And then they said, we need a show farrier. Will you do the shows for us? So I thought, well, if I don't do the shows, maybe I'll lose my job.
Yep.
So I said, sure, I'd be happy to. And at first it was a real challenge because during the summertime is when their shows are on, and that's my busiest time of the year. And
Right.
I wasn't too keen on
Well,
having all that extra work
no kidding.
and being away from clients during the shows.
Right.
Although at that time there were 3 shows. There's a show at the beginning of June, the National, and then there was the Junior at the end of June, early July, and then there was the Masters in the fall in September. So it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, you weren't there all summer.
No, but then they kept adding shows. And when Linda Southern, Marg's daughter, started to get more involved she was competing as one of the top riders in the world on the show circuit, the show jumping circuit. When she decided to kind of back off from that and start being more involved in producing the shows at Spruce Meadows, she started adding shows to the summer. And eventually there got to be 5 shows in a summer series starting on the 1st of June and ending about mid-July.
Oh, okay. You were tied to the show at that point.
Yeah, I was. That sort of cut out my ability to compete at the Stampede because I was so busy with the horse shows that I tried for a few years competing at the Stampede, but the more shows she put on, the harder it was for me to find time to get away from the shows and compete. One of their big shows was on during the Stampede, the same time as the Stampede. So
okay. So with all of that, because it sounds like you were pretty busy, you had clients outside of Spruce that you would travel to. Then you had all of that to cover.
Yeah, that was a major problem until the point that I had so many clients that showed at Spruce Meadows that I could almost manage to get to their horses at Spruce Meadows.
Right. Okay.
While they were there competing.
Yeah. And I imagine that would have made things a little bit easier.
A little bit.
So in amongst all of that, how did you find time to practice?
Ignoring my family.
Yeah?
I think, I spent a lot of nights practicing. And
bit of a sacrifice.
Yeah. I did it at home, so the kids were always there. And
always in the shop with you?
And Connor, who's the boss now.
Yeah.
And from the time he was able to walk, he was always getting into things. I remember one day he was probably a year and a half, and we were outside, and I was building shoes. It was not too cold a day, but there was snow on the ground and fairly cool. And he was out there with me, and all of a sudden I saw this glow go past the corner of my eye, and just out of my peripheral vision I saw this orange glow, and I look over, and Connor's got a piece of bar stock, which is the steel that we use to make the shoes out of, and it's about 3.5 feet long, and he's stuck that into the forge and heated it up, and then he would take it over and stab it into the snow and watch it sizzle and hiss. That was a bit of a wake-up. I better keep my eye on that boy.
No kidding. Yep.
And for him, it wasn't a real passion until much later.
Really?
Yeah.
That seems to be a pretty common thing.
He was happy to watch me at the competitions. They would come to the competitions with me and have a good time and cheer me on. But usually the competitions were held at sometimes rodeos or places where they could have a lot of fun and see a lot of other things. So
okay.
Always had the family around at the competitions.
Good. Yeah. So do you think you sacrificed a lot of sleep too then? Like, would you practice late into the night, or did you just
in the summers, I've always found that I have a tremendous amount of energy because of the long summers we have in Canada, especially up in Calgary, where, we go from probably 4:45 in the morning till almost 11 o'clock at night with sunshine. So
right, so the long days.
And for some reason, that really keeps you going. Mm-hmm. It seems like you can get by on less sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
Then the winter hits.
And the winter hits, and sad.
Yeah. You just want to hibernate.
Seasonal acquired deficiency kicks in.
Yeah.
Although it's only ever happened to me once. One year it
struck?
It seemed to really affect me. I just didn't have any energy in the winter, and I attribute it to that. Only the 1 year, thank God.
Right. Now, in keeping that kind of pace, did you ever run into burnout?
No. You know what? When I would go away for a little holiday or vacation, I would be anxious to get back.
Okay.
Even though I was overworked.
Yeah.
Still, I'd be anxious to get back to it. Yeah.
Now, with the transition of having your son join up, at what point in your career did he come into the picture? Did you train him, or did he go off to school?
Yeah, he worked with, I had another farrier, Patrick Blas, who worked with me and who was basically my partner.
Okay.
It wasn't a business arrangement. It was more we worked together.
Okay.
I paid him, but for a while. But Connor would come and help us at times, and he went away to university, and he did other things, but he did come and finally start working with us. First, it was just something for him to do and a little bit of an income for him. It wasn't. I don't think he was really inspired or keen on it, but he hung around and
Eventually caught the bug?
well, he'd go away and come back, and then he kind of got inspired, and now he's really inspired.
What do you think the catalyst was to get him inspired?
I think proficiency. He realized that he was getting proficient at it, and he thought, gee, maybe I do like this after all.
Right.
The nice thing about doing this for a living is we get fairly instant gratification from doing a job well.
Yeah.
It's not like a lot of office jobs where you have projects that can sometimes take years before you see any fruition. You think you might be getting somewhere, but you really don't see the results for a long time. With this job, within an hour and a half or however long it takes you to do the job, shoe a horse, whatever you're doing, you can either be frustrated because you didn't get what you wanted done, or you can get gratification because you did something to you did a nice job. It looked good. You think you helped the horse. So that fairly instant gratification is really rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty important in motivating us.
No kidding.
Yeah.
After a career that spans that long, I'm sure you saw trends that would come in and go away.
Oh, yeah. Like the old saying goes, it's all been done before.
Yeah.
It's
There's nothing new.
You're not reinventing the wheel. You may not have seen it before. It's been there before.
Right.
Yeah.
Were there some that you embraced and regretted you did, or were there some that you just couldn't?
I don't think there are any that I regretted embracing. You try and keep an open mind about it all, because if you do poo-poo something before you or reject it before you give it a chance, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense to you, there might be something in there that actually is valuable.
Yeah.
Sometimes the only thing valuable is the mistake, and boy, you can learn better from mistakes than you ever can from doing it right.
Yep, for sure.
When you make the mistake, you know what went wrong. If you did it right, you may not know. What you were doing to make it right. But if you do it wrong and you get that mistake,
those are instantaneously
you don't want to do
too.
that again.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like Michael Jordan said, I've lost hundreds of games. I've made so many mistakes. That's why I'm so successful.
Right.
Because I've made so many mistakes.
For sure. And did you notice a difference in the shoeing? I'm sure you would have, because you would have people coming. It's an international competition there. A lot of stuff coming from Europe.
Oh, it's a great learning experience. Both the Stampede blacksmithing competition, we got to see disastrous stuff. We got to learn from those mistakes, the people that were just terrible, and we got to see incredible stuff. But with the horse shows, the same thing. You get to see incredible work. You really get to see what doesn't work. You really get to see that.
Right.
The good stuff, it doesn't come in because it was wrong. It comes in because the horse lost a shoe.
Right.
Horses don't lose shoes. They take them off.
Yeah.
A show jumper, it doesn't matter how well that shoe is put on. they're going to slip.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
they're going to go off stride for whatever reason, and they're going to take too long a stride and grab a shoe, and it's going to come off. It doesn't matter how well it's put on, how well hidden it is. In fact, some of the most common lost shoes are the ones that are shod too short and tight because the horse isn't moving as well. And a horse that weighs, 1,200 to 1,400 pounds, sometimes even, some of them are up to 1,800 pounds. At a canter, when they hit the hoof, that hoof is so plastic and elastic that the hoof will move dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't tear part of their hoof off in the process, that shoe is coming off.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how well it's hidden, it can come off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Now, with Spruce Meadows, are there varying footings or is it just grass?
The competition rings are all grass.
Okay.
In the winter, when they're showing inside, it's synthetic.
Okay.
At one time, it was sand.
Right.
With, a base that they put the sand on. They'd build a base under the sand and then put sand on top. And they tried to make a nice, even depth of sand so that it was consistent. But now it's synthetic.
Okay. Now, we met in that roundtable talk
On synthetic footings.
Exactly. So, for the audience,
And the joys.
yeah, I was really glad when I voiced what some of the things that I had found and tried and that they worked,
Yeah.
that you were voicing the same things.
Yeah.
And I didn't know you. I didn't even know where you were from, but I
No.
knew that just by the way you were talking about it, that you were somebody who had definitely dealt with that transition from the original footing into
Yeah.
that. So what were some of the things that you did that you found worked? First of all, what started to happen when they changed to the synthetic footing?
All kinds of things started to crop up. An awful lot of coffin joint issues
Okay.
were coming up. I've noticed an increase. I'm not sure if this is related, but quarter cracks are much more common now than they ever were. And that's the only thing I can attribute it to. I've seen a vast improvement in general in the horseshoeing preparation that the farriers are putting on the feet is much improved across the board in the entire world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure it's not a change in the horseshoeing. I don't think it's a change in the any of the appliances we're putting on. Although we do go through, like you say, fads
Yeah.
that may or may not be beneficial. What doesn't work doesn't go. It doesn't work for long.
Right.
It doesn't matter who the salesman is.
It fades away.
Yeah, it does. All I can attribute this increase in quarter cracks to is that footing.
Right.
I'm not going to go out and say that that's it, but I can't think of anything else.
Right. And as we're talking about this, I realized maybe you don't want to talk about the footing at Spruce Meadows.
Well, because all the competitions are on grass, I definitely notice that the horses are way happier. They can compete longer on that.
Yeah.
And all the international riders tell me that the horses are happier,
Yeah.
that they like grass much better. All the warm-up rings are synthetic, but they're a much looser synthetic than most synthetic rings are.
Okay.
So I think there's some advantage to that because they're able to penetrate more into the footing
Yeah.
than a lot of synthetic rings.
So it behaves a little bit more
Yeah.
like the old.
And in the
stuff.
indoor rings, they change the footing quite frequently. And at the times when they change the footing and it's quite loose, I'm delighted to see that because
Okay.
the horses are going into it much deeper and
Yeah.
they're not landing on that firm footing and getting the shear force on the joints must be incredible because the as soon as the shoe hits the ground, it does not move in a forward direction at all.
Right.
It does descend slightly. Depending on the base that they've put in, and the type of footing that they've used on top, it can descend a fair amount, but some of the footings are so firm that it's almost like stall matting on concrete. It's that firm.
Right.
I never used to worry about coming off a horse, whether I was going over the jump or whether I was just flatting the horse. I never used to worry about coming off the horse. Some guys, their attitude is you don't come off the horse, and they do anything they can to stay on. I wasn't like that. I didn't worry too much about my horses taking off, and they'd usually just stop and wait for me to get back on. So I didn't worry about coming off. But on this stuff, this synthetic footing, I would do anything I could to stay on.
Right. Squeeze a little tighter.
You bet.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that you did to compensate for those properties of the footing?
I tried to do anything I could to get the shoe to move more when it landed, reduce traction, break over easier. I tried doing a rocker in the heel and the toe. At first I was doing a lot of rockering of the toe. I'm not too sure that that's helping at all.
No?
I'm a little worried that it might be allowing the horse to knuckle over a bit and cause more strain on the coffin joint, more strain on the ligaments. I'm not sure about that. I'm worried about it.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm not happy with anything I've done.
Really?
To try and compensate. Except that I know that the more traction you have, the less the horses want to go.
Right.
Some of the horses with too much traction. We used to use concave at Spruce Meadows because the concave allows us to have better traction on grass.
Right, yeah.
It's better traction on just about any surface.
Mm-hmm.
But we started discovering that a lot of horses, some horses were fine with the concave on, but most horses did not like the amount of traction that concave gives them, and so we started moving away from concave, especially in the indoor rings. But in the grass, we'd still go with concave on our own clients for the summer series when they're on the grass. At most of the horse shows in Alberta, they're all pretty much turf. Grass rings.
Right.
They might have sand or synthetic in the warm-up rings. And at Spruce Meadows, there are warm-up rings that have grass too. And quite often the final jump is grass as well. So the riders love to warm up on the grass rings, except when it's hailing.
That's understandable.
Then they're on the indoor, and they're in the they're in the synthetic.
Right.
But even if it's raining, they're quite often out in the grass ring.
Right.
The grass warm-ups.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with concave, are you hand making them?
Yeah. Well, until Billy Crothers came up with his.
Right.
Actually, no. Pledger's made a beautiful concave shoe. But in the early days, I wanted to build everything, so it didn't matter what it was, I was building it. The local Farrier supply used to ask all my friends, all the other farriers, why I wasn't buying shoes from them.
Where were you getting
Where
them
was
from?
I getting my shoes? Well, I was building everything.
Okay.
I thought until I can do the kind of job I want building them, I wanted to keep practicing building them. So everything I stuck on for probably 3 years straight, it was handmade.
Okay.
It didn't matter whether it was what kind of stock I was using, but concave stock being the most successful on turf, most of my shoes were made with concave. At that time, there were very few aluminum jumper shoes. There were no aluminum shoes that, like bar shoes. There were no, shoes with anything that deviated from the norm.
Okay.
A lot of the shoes that we used back then that needed to be, like you couldn't buy a steel bar shoe.
You had to make.
Very seldom, yeah. So any unusual shoe we had to make, pretty much. So you want to practice and get the skills down so you can make those shoes. And we got to play around with titanium, and
Oh, yeah?
that was something Bob Marshall was into at first, until he decided that with titanium it cools so quickly.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't cool quickly, actually. But when it does cool, it goes from being like soft putty to just, you can't touch it. Nothing will move it.
Oh, okay.
When we go to hot fit the shoe to make the proper seat for the shoe, quite often the shoe will be a little too cool, and we'll have to heat the titanium up again to shape it or to hot fit it. He decided after a while that too much trouble.
Just, yeah. And were they resettable? I've heard that titanium was a thing, but that it didn't seem to last for very long.
It probably wore about as well as steel.
It did? Okay.
Yeah, Bob would buy scrap titanium.
Oh, really?
And even at that, it was expensive.
Okay.
Even the scrap was expensive. He had to play around a bit to find the right alloy. Some of it is almost like magnesium. It'll catch on fire and keep burning.
Oh, man.
But we found some good stuff. We were making it about the same dimension as an aluminum jumper shoe, which would be close to about 3/8 by 1 inch, 10 millimeter by 20 to 24 millimeters.
Okay.
And it worked pretty well. Some of the commercial shoes, they were using a much thinner and narrower section of stock, and some of those were cracking through to the nail holes. With titanium, if you score it badly, it can sometimes break at that point.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little brittle.
Okay.
It's really flashy at night on pavement or concrete because it makes these great sparks.
Oh, really?
When the horses slip on it.
I could see that going.
That's why you
very
see
wrong.
with the race cars, you see the sparks as they're bottoming out on the track.
Mm-hmm.
It's that titanium giving off all those nice sparks.
Just learned something there. Yeah. Wow. Now, do you still hand make your shoes?
No. A lot of my customers were saying, why on earth are you making them? I mean, what's wrong with those ones that are machine made? And at the time, what was wrong with those ones that were machine made is they weren't very good.
Yeah, I've heard that.
They were tough to apply. Some of them they didn't have any pitch on the nail holes, the ones that we were able to get. It wasn't until we were able to get European shoes, which was probably in the 80s, maybe late 70s, that we were able to get horseshoes that were easy to apply, and it even made the poorer shoers look good. Pissed us off. I think that was when I decided that people didn't want to pay enough for me to build the shoe.
Right.
Some people did, and I kept building shoes for them. Even if I'm able to spin a pair of shoes out in 15 minutes, I'm still not able to charge on the average person enough to pay me as well to make shoes as they pay me to install them.
Right.
And getting all these good shoes that are machine made that were able to do almost as good a job as a handmade, still not as good.
Mm-hmm.
I still prefer.
Do you?
I still prefer applying a handmade shoe, providing somebody that's good is building them.
Right, yeah.
If the apprentice is just sloppily turning something out, I don't want to put those on.
It's then you grab
fun.
the ones off the rack.
But a well-made handmade shoe is so much easier to nail on.
It does.
Your nails are in the right place, they're the right pitch. The shoe's made for that foot. You've just done everything that you can, and you can do anything as easy to install and as well fit as it can be.
Right.
Whereas with the machine-made shoes, you might have to do little cheats and
some modifications.
Just modifications to get it to where you want it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine says, "Why do you go to all that trouble to modify that thing when you can just build one?"
Yeah. So, you're getting it from both sides.
Yeah.
Your clients want you to buy them, and
I can get paid a lot more to install them than I can to build them. So
yeah. But I'm sure you learned a lot in those years of building.
Oh, yeah.
That.
And I miss building them too.
Do you?
Yeah. For a while there, I was just too busy installing to even think about building as many as I could.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting a little more time. I'm starting to build more. And
Oh, cool.
that's an aspect of the job I really like. Some guys, they like working with the horse, and I love working with horses too. I like animals. I like any animal, even the ones that bite. But as long as they don't bite too long and hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and horses can be really dangerous. There's probably no more dangerous animal than a horse if it's frightened. Or I've had more than a couple friends killed by horses.
Oh, really?
And maimed. One of my best friends when I was a kid, he disappeared on me. I didn't find out till quite a bit later that he'd been kicked in the head.
Oh, wow.
By a stallion, and he was never the same again. He came back, and it was like he was a 5-year-old, and at that time I was probably 8, and
Right.
we couldn't relate.
Mm-hmm.
We just...
Not the same person.
He was not the same person at all.
Yeah.
His total personality had changed. That really shook me.
I bet.
I've had other friends and acquaintances die since then. Just freak accidents,
Yeah.
Hasn't deterred me from working with the
Obviously.
things, and I'm still not as careful as I should be.
Yeah, we do get complacent.
Yeah, because so often they're so friendly and nice, but I haven't been kicked often. In fact, in all the time that I've worked on horses, on the job, I've been kicked 3 times. Once in the arm, and although it left me a little dimple in one of my muscles, it was not really any big deal. It was really hard to squeeze nippers for a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
The next one was just a couple of years ago, and it was a horse that you would never expect to kick you. She was a nice mare. I don't know what it was that set her off, whether she was a little quick to kick at other horses.
Mm-hmm.
And she might have just had a lapse and just fired out. And I happened to have the hind foot up on the hoof stand, and I didn't even notice the hoof move. I just felt a little bit of an impact, but mostly an incredible shove that sent me back probably 20 feet.
Oh, geez.
Up against ended up in a stall doorway. And immediately I got up, and I didn't really notice any effects. And I chastised her a little, and she seemed to be very contrite and sorry for having kicked me.
Right.
And it was like she was kind of surprised that it had happened as well. And the other one was my fault. He was gazing up the aisle, and instead of doing what you should do and letting him know you're there, and running your hand, touching him on the shoulder, running your hand back down, I was busy chatting and paying attention to other things, and I just walked over and absent-mindedly grabbed the leg, and he just fired out
Gotcha.
and got me. Just one of those things. Keep your mind on the job.
Mm-hmm. No, it's easy to be distracted, especially with clients around and people asking questions.
Yeah, and you, like you say, you get complacent. You trust the animal. Unless you're totally oblivious, you do get a feel for their mood, what they're likely to do. Quite often they'll try and nip us, and we know that they're going to try and nip us.
Yeah, you know that
And we
sound
avoid it,
when
yeah.
their gums open up.
Or it's almost a sixth sense. You know that they're getting ready to do something. You notice when they're getting tense, when they're a little worried about something, so you relax and you don't hold them firmly, you let them go, and you do get a little complacent because you're so comfortable with them. And by and large, they're quite friendly, the horses. I think we develop a pretty good rapport with a lot of our horses that we work on.
Well, you seem like a pretty calm individual in the first place, and your son as well. So I imagine that helps.
To a point. Then the reptile brain kicks in.
Right, yeah.
And you forget the world. All you see is red.
I imagine it just even being of that demeanor probably helps.
We are fairly easygoing, I would say,
Yeah.
by and large.
This portion of the podcast is called the Stratum Tectorium. These are the short answer, surface stuff questions, but it's okay if the guest wants to go deeper. Enjoy. Your favorite book
Oh my God.
or books?
Boy, there's so many.
Yeah?
Books.
You just like books.
People's ideas.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're fantasy, whether they're technical books. Yeah, I just love books.
So you're a pretty avid reader then?
Yeah. It doesn't matter what the author is, as long as he's got something to say.
Yeah.
Books that have poor plots, poor storylines, poor character development, I can't get into them. For some reason, although Stephen King is a great author and I can read a little bit of Stephen King, for some reason, I don't know, I guess I can't suspend disbelief enough to get into a Stephen King novel.
Okay. This might be the first time I found out what the guest's least favorite book is.
Lord of the Rings I sure enjoyed.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a good one. I really like historical novels. You learn an awful lot about the time. Some of my best times in English literature at university were learning the history behind and the history at the time of like Shakespeare, Chaucer, and so you'd learn an awful lot about the people from their books.
Yeah.
You know, the people, the time, the attitudes. You really learn a lot about that.
For sure.
The history. It's fascinating.
It is, yeah. Your favorite brand of work boots?
I don't know, because I've never had a decent work boot.
No? Okay.
It's funny, for the longest time, I worked in tennis shoes.
Okay.
And I really liked it. It was very comfortable. And like I said before, you kind of develop a sixth sense. You know when the horse is going to
stomp on you?
Yeah, so you sort of curl your toes and turn your foot away from the insult. Sometimes with the steel-toed boots, you get a little complacent and the horse lands on your instep.
Yep, for sure.
And you should have moved instead of being so sure that boot would protect you.
Yep, for sure.
I would say probably I've heard of some great boots. Red Wings, Danner, some of these guys that build these handmade custom boots. I've heard terrific things about them. The loggers, they just rave about them. But
you haven't tested them out yet?
I've never tested them out. No, I've never been wise enough to take people's advice and use good footwear.
Yeah. How about your dream Farrier rig?
Yeah, I haven't discovered that one yet. No. We keep trying. We keep changing things. For a couple of years there, we used a travel box, the portable sort of self-contained little Farrier units that you ship with the horses when they travel. For a couple of years, we used a small horse trailer that we would just put the travel box in and have just roll the travel box into the aisle or barn or wherever it was we were working. And I really enjoyed that in the winters because we have such cold winters in
you want to be
the Calgary
inside.
area, in the spots that we couldn't pull our whole truck into.
Yeah.
A fair number of them. That was very comfortable, being able to stay inside, although hot fitting in the winter is no fun unless you have good ventilation.
Yeah,
and
it gets pretty...
Sometimes there's not good ventilation.
Yep.
So you open the door anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Your favorite rounding hammer?
I have a Sterling from England, a 2-pound Sterling. That's one of my favorites. Another one was a hammer that was made by a millwright in Britain. It's about I think it's 1.5 pounds about now.
Okay.
It might have started off a little heavier, but I've been dressing it down over the years, trying to keep it trued up. It's a beautiful little hammer. It was made by a machinist that became a farrier, and
Oh, pretty cool.
yeah, He actually apprenticed with Pops Marshall, Bob Darsh's dad.
Oh, okay.
And that's when I got it, was when Pops Marshall came over, and the apprentice came with him. And
Okay, cool.
And he had some that he'd made up, and I got lucky enough to get one.
Sold them to the Canadians.
Yeah.
Your favorite type of bar stock to work with?
Probably titanium, because it is, although it's a struggle, titanium is funny. The skin on the titanium will fold and buckle, so you quite often get a lot of little tiny fissures on the surface of the titanium, but it is just like as soft as putty. It's like turning Play-Doh, if you can imagine.
Oh, really?
Shaping Play-Doh. It's that soft when it gets hot.
Okay.
As soon as it cools off, it's you can't touch it.
No.
But it is so easy to work when it's hot.
Okay.
Concave makes a really nice shoe really quickly.
Yep.
I know a lot of people are frustrated by it because it's not as easy to turn as a flat stock.
No.
Because of the concavity, and
there's a whole other set of techniques for it.
You have to move it around a lot and get used to how it moves to make it easy. But once you've got it down, boy, it can make a nice shoe really quick.
Yep, for sure.
And it's got everything you want in it. You don't have to build that in.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to take the time to build it in.
What's your favorite pastime after work?
I love skiing. I used to ski competitively, so I'd say skiing's a big passion. What I'd really like to try is wingsuit flying, but I used to hang glide, and after 3 of my friends met their demise hang gliding, my girlfriend at the time said, no.
Maybe you should try something different.
I think you're going to have to choose here.
Yeah.
And I was pretty stuck on her at the time, so.
So you chose.
Yeah. That wingsuit flying looks really cool. But I've got another girlfriend that I married that doesn't
probably
want me to
wouldn't
do
approve of that either.
And you have to make something like 190 jumps, skydiving jumps, before they'll even let you
don the suit.
Try. And within a certain time limit, I think it's in a 2-year time limit, you have to do 190 jumps before you can get the wingsuit on and try that. So skiing, like free falling off a cornice or something, that initial free fall, I've never skydived. I wouldn't mind trying that.
Bit of a thrill seeker.
Looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one of the flying Wallendas. Somebody asked him once, I don't know how old he was when he was asked the question. I think he was in his 80s or something. They said, "Why do you do this?" His answer was the feeling that you get when you do it. He said, the rest of life is just waiting.
To get that feeling. Yep. That's true thrill seeker. What's the next thing on your bucket list?
That.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not going to happen.
There you go.
We just took up paddleboarding not too long ago. We decided to go out and rent a couple paddle boards, my wife and I and my sister, and we thought we'd take half an hour and see if we liked it. 6 hours later, we were still out there and still having fun. So we're really getting into that. We don't even use the kayaks anymore because
of the paddleboards.
We enjoy the paddleboards so much.
That's cool. What's your favorite brand of keg shoe?
I'm kind of partial to Kirkhart's, I think.
Okay.
For keg shoes. Although they're all getting pretty good.
Yeah.
Boy, there's getting to be some really good shoes out there.
Yeah.
And everybody has a shoe that seems to fit a certain niche.
Yeah.
That is more successful than all the other shoes. So
right.
There's an awful lot of good shoes out there. I remember one of the shoes that was sort of an improvement on the norm was Nordic shoes. One of their attractions was you could temper them, you could harden them very well. They would get so hard that we couldn't touch them with a drill bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you quench them, at the right temperature.
Right.
Quench them hot. And so they lasted really well.
Yeah. Oh, those are great for resets. Leather or synthetic pads?
They all have their place. The problem that we have with leather is it remodels so much. It can distort. It crushes pretty quickly in wet weather. Mm-hmm. But I like it initially. I like leather. I like the idea of it. And I think it does cushion quite nicely. Anything, though, that isn't hoof consistency allows the shoe to rise slightly, and that causes the nail to move within the shoe. Yeah, we quite often get risen clinches with two. I remember Sorbothane, a company that produced pads years ago. They had some therapeutic pads that were not intended for. They were just intended for convalescing horses. They were a very cushy, thick pad, but people tried to use them on the show jumpers to lessen the concussion, and we would destroy the pads in no time. The shoes loosened up. The pads were destroyed within a week quite often.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime you have anything that's not the same consistency as the hoof, well, even the hooves, you get movement there.
Yeah.
Loosening the nails. Being a chauffeur, you realize what allows shoes to loosen up, to come off more easily, and pads are one of those
Definitely
things.
Definitely that thing, yeah.
Yeah, the worst thing in the world is a wedge pad with a bar shoe on it. There's so much target there.
Yeah. Ideal number of horses to shoe all around in one day?
1.
You're not the first person to say that.
No, that's not enough. One doesn't satisfy you. I don't know. I've done 12. That was not a good day.
Yeah.
It was gratifying because when I got to the end of the day, it was gratifying to have it done.
Didn't put that last foot down?
It was gratifying in the fact that it made me a lot of money. I couldn't do it day after day. I think ideally for me, 5 jumpers.
Right.
If it was just plain shoes on a regular horse.
Yeah.
Maybe 7, 8.
Okay.
To me, that's a good day.
Yeah.
You know, that you've worked long enough.
Yeah.
And it's time to go and do something else with your day.
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and I don't want to be a dull boy.
Not a thrill seeker like yourself.
Even though maybe I am a dull boy.
What's your favorite anvil?
I have to say I like the mouse hole pattern, like the Peter Wrights. The Kolsovas have a similar pattern. I really like that horn. The horn that they build, the way it's made, it's a really versatile horn on those anvils. Yeah, it's just a good classic anvil, the mouse hole style. I don't know if it was mouse hole that originally came up with that particular pattern, but I know that Peter Wright used their pattern when he started building his anvils, and I love the Peter Wright anvils, and like I said, the Kolsovas, I've got both, and I love them both.
Okay.
I like the Scott anvil. I like the Future, the Future 3 it's got a fairly round horn on it.
The Future 2. Yeah, that's the one. I've got one of those in my rig, yeah.
I think the Future 3 probably has the same horn, but it has a different face on it.
Yeah, no, actually the horn's slightly different. It's a bit flatter. It's not a true round one.
I do not like a flat horn.
I can't shape on them.
We had a Future 5. We bought it with one of the travel boxes, and I could not work on that. No. It was too flat. I couldn't find a round spot to save my life on that horn.
Yep. No, and I know people who use them day in, day out and can. But.
Yeah, I know people that love them to death. That makes a good bridge to straighten a branch, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. After that, I don't know what you do. Use the turning cams, I guess.
I like to make my shoe hot enough that I don't have to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
I shod horses cold. It is not a lot of fun.
No.
Doing it cold. I don't enjoy it, although I did it.
Nor do I. Favorite inspirational quote?
I think one of my favorite quotes is, I can't remember who the man who quoted it was, but sort of my philosophy in life. It's not a practical one. Don't walk in front of me, for I may not follow. and don't walk behind me, for I may not lead. Walk beside me and be my friend. I think that's my favorite.
Cool. What do you use as your planner or agenda?
My son. It improved my life tremendously.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, it
when I
takes a
made
lot of
him the
stress
boss.
off of you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just show up for work now.
Nice. Favorite method of soothing aches and pains?
I don't do enough of it.
any
Yoga,
of us.
probably something like that. Yoga, Pilates, to relieve the aches and pains. I never wanted to use a chiropractor. I thought they're kind of quacks, but I did have an issue 10, 15 years ago maybe. I think I probably prolapsed a disc a bit or got it pinching a nerve. And it really put a damper on things. I tried to, stretch it out, but it got to the point where I couldn't ignore it. My wife, one of her colleagues, her father had some back issues, and he had gotten to the point where he was in a wheelchair. And he finally found a chiropractor that sorted him out and got him out of the wheelchair and walking and fixed him right up. She gave me this chiropractor's number, and I went to see her. And at the time, I also had some issues with developing rotator cuff issues, tennis elbow.
Okay.
And it had just come out of nowhere. And I'd wonder, well, what did I do to strain that? And then it had disappeared just as quickly. And she said, oh, it's your neck. It's out. And she'd adjust my neck, and
all gone.
Yeah, everything was fine again.
Cool.
And so she fixed my back up too, and her husband got a job in England. She went over to England with them. So I wasn't able to use her anymore. So the chiropractor that took over from her, every time I went, I felt worse. And it's not the technique, it's the practitioner, the application.
Right.
I found out about another one. He was a sports, did a lot of they did the bobsled team, and he was a sports chiropractor basically. And I went to him, and he was able to do things for me. So that's probably one of the biggest things that sorts me out when things are not going right. And the physiotherapist that they have, and massage therapists that they have in this clinic, they all can make me
Team
feel
effort
really
to keep
good.
you, keep you together.
Physiotherapists giving me exercises to really help too, make you feel better than you ever did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your favorite brand of jeans?
Don't think I have one. I'm wearing Levi's right now.
That's a fairly common
I'm
one.
not too keen on the $300 jeans. It seems to me those are just a little too much of a
little too
waste of money.
Yeah, no kidding. For something
They
we're going to wear
might
out.
be pretty, but I don't think they wear any better.
Your favorite genre of music?
Oh, anything. Just about anything. Crying in your beer music, not so much.
Okay.
But yeah, lots of country artists I like. My kids listen to rap. I like some of the rappers. I like music that has a melody, though. Any good melodies. It doesn't matter whether it's Beethoven's Ninth Symphony or Procol Harum or the U2 or whoever it is. A good melody gets me going. But yeah, just about any music.
Okay. Do you work out?
Not enough, no. When I was younger, a lot. And I really noticed the difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you meditate?
Too much. I meditate while I'm working.
Yeah. A lot of people say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people say it's my ADD.
Yeah. Or we could just call it flow.
Yeah.
What would you have been if not a farrier?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would have probably bounced around from one thing to another.
Till you found farriery.
Yeah. It would have been a tough go to do a lot of jobs. I couldn't do an office job, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe being an architect would have been gratifying enough to
compensate.
Quite often they get to go on site and get out of the office. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's strange. When I was in high school and university, I had no interest in manual jobs at all, like carpentry, or I couldn't imagine doing them and enjoying it. A hands-on job was just not on my radar at all.
Yeah,
it wasn't until I just happened to, be so interested in what my farrier was doing. Although I admired craftsmen, and my grandfather was, although he was never a carpenter, he was a plumber, but he would admire furniture, and he'd always be caressing wood, inspecting it, and he could tell you what any piece of furniture was made of. And
right.
Yeah, but I admired the craftsmanship. I admire any craftsmanship, but never occurred to me to be interested in it as a vocation until I happened to stumble across being a blacksmith, farrier, and being a farrier without being a blacksmith was not satisfying for me.
Right.
I love the blacksmithing aspect of it.
The holistic approach.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope so.
And is there anybody you would recommend that I should approach about interviewing?
Oh, God. Endless number. You've probably interviewed a lot of them, I imagine.
No, we're still in, I've only done, there are only 12 episodes, so.
Well, gosh, the legends like Bob Marshall.
I'd love to talk to him.
Randy Blackstock, Bruce Haig, James Findler, Nick Spencer. God, the list is endless. There's so many inspirational farriers out there, and guys that have so much insight and knowledge and enthusiasm. Craig Turnka, Shane Carter, all those guys. Jay Sharp, he's gone. Can't do it anymore. So many of those guys that terrific craftsmen, terrific personalities, some assholes that are really interesting.
Yeah, I guess there's that too.
Speaking of which, Marshall Isles is my favorite asshole. We're terrific friends, and one of the trainers that we know died a few years back, and we were talking about it, and one of his apprentices was sitting there, and I said to Marshall, I said, yeah, it's a shame. I guess we'll never see him again. And his apprentice looked at me with the strangest, what? Of course you won't. He didn't say it, but he gave me this odd look and couldn't figure out what I was talking about. And I said, and I realized he was, thinking, well, of course you won't see him again. He's dead. I said to him, Marshall and I aren't going to the same place as he is. And Marshall says to me, yeah, but I hear it's a dry heat.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for doing this. This has been awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I look forward to running into you again. Hopefully at Spruce.
Yeah, heck. It's great coming to these events. We get to meet great people, and you get to see your old friends. I've bumped into George Fitzgerald the other day. I wasn't too sure I'd see him again in this lifetime. I was thrilled to see him, and so many other friends and people that I don't see on a regular basis. Some of them I do, some of them I don't.
That's great.
Lots of fun.
Yeah.
No end to the enthusiasm and the interest.
No, you can't get bored here.
No, keeps you young.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again, Lance.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I'm really glad I was able to sit down and have that conversation with Lance. He's such an easygoing and kind man. It felt like I was talking to someone I had known for years. At the end of the last podcast, I mentioned the fact that I was looking forward to hearing from farriers who were helping out others affected by the COVID-19 virus. A gentleman named Jake Streisketh, I hope I pronounced that right, Jake, from the Denver, Colorado region, reached out to offer his assistance to anyone who needed it. Inspired by Jake's kind gesture, we decided to create a page on the Mullins Farrier website to connect those offering help with those in need. It can be found at mullinsfarrier.com by clicking under the menu bar and under the title, Farriers in Need During COVID-19. I know it's a trying time out there for many of us, but if we stick together, we'll make it through the other side of this. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other out there. Thank you for listening.